I thought my rich grandfather's tears had dried up the day my father died. He stood still at the coffin, eyes dry as stone. But that night, in the glass boardroom of Stonevale Holdings, my stepmother's metal bracelet scraped my cheek, a click from his walnut cane flashed blue, and the whole building heard the truth. It turns out, he doesn't cry with tears. He cries by freezing an empire. My name is Ava Ridgewell. I am 29 years old, and I am standing at my father's funeral, watching my grandfather refuse to cry. The place is St. Rook Church, a Grayford institution of old stone and older money. Outside, a persistent October drizzle clicks against the windows, a sound too small for the grief it's supposed to accompany. The wind forces itself through the leaded joints of the stained glass, creating a low, tuneless whistle that cuts through the organ's somber tones. The air inside is thick, a battle between two opposing scents: the cloying, heavy sweetness of thousands of white lilies and the sharp, chemical bite of industrial-strength floor cleaner. The lilies are losing. My hands are numb. I rest them on the edge of my father's coffin, feeling the cold, polished grain of the sassafras wood, not oak. My father had always insisted on sassafras, claiming it had a better fire in its grain, a small, pointless rebellion against the Ridgewell oak and granite standard. My fingers, chilled by the damp air, trace the carved edge. I'm trying to feel something, anything, besides the cold. Beside me, a pillar of stillness, stands my grandfather, Harlan Ridgewell. Harlan is a man carved from the same granite as the steps of the Grayford National Bank he once saved from collapse. He leans on his walnut cane, but it's not for support. It's a punctuation mark, a physical extension of his will. His suit is dark, severe, and perfect. His face, under a shock of thick white hair, is a mask of composed indifference. There are no tears. His eyes, the same sharp blue as my own, are dry. His jaw is set. He hasn't moved, hasn't flinched, hasn't trembled since he arrived. He just stands, watching the coffin as if it's a ledger that refuses to balance. On my other side, performing her grief, is Marla, my stepmother, my father's widow of 72 hours. She is a vision in bespoke black, her velvet-wrapped steel persona softened for the public. She greets the endless line of guests with a practiced, measured sorrow, her smile perfectly calibrated. "Thank you for coming," she murmurs, her voice a husky whisper that suggests tears held bravely back. It's a masterful performance. As she leans in to accept a hug from a bank executive, the cluster of heavy polished metal bracelets on her wrist slides down her arm with a faint, metallic shing. The sound is sharp, bright, and wrong in the heavy silence of the church. She is wearing her power, even here. The guests are a blur of dark suits and polite fictions. They file past, their faces arranged in masks of appropriate solemnity. Our deepest sympathies, Ava. He was a great man, a pillar of the community. If there's anything we can do. Their words are like the white chrysanthemums piled by the door, perfectly formed, scentless, and cold. They fall to the flagstone floor and shatter, never touching the raw, unacknowledged truth of our family. They don't know my father. Not really. They know the CEO of Stonevale Holdings. They know the Ridgewell name. They don't know the man who taught me to read stock tickers before I could ride a bike, or the man who Marla had been systematically isolating for the past 3 years. I feel a sudden, intense pressure, a need to scream, to shatter the stained glass, to tell them all to stop lying. Instead, I just stand there, my spine rigid. A movement beside me. Harlan. He doesn't look at me. He continues to stare at the sassafras coffin. His voice comes, not a whisper, but a flat, low command that cuts through the organ music just for me. "Keep your spine straight, Ava." That's all. No comfort. No, it will be okay. Just an order. His voice is as flat and emotionless as the engraving on a tombstone. It's the same voice he uses in the boardroom to dismantle a hostile quarterly report. It's the voice of control. I obey. I pull my shoulders back, lifting my chin. My neck aches. The cold from the wood seems to be seeping into my palms, traveling up my arms, settling in my chest. I lift my eyes from the casket, past the suffocating lilies, to the towering stained glass window above the altar. It depicts some grim, forgotten saint, his hands raised in judgment. The weak, gray light of the rain filters through the colors, a deep, judicial cobalt and a jarring, bloody crimson. The light washes over the front of the church, painting the scene in unreal colors. In the reflection on the glass, distorted and dark, I see the shape of my grandfather, and for a fleeting, sickening moment, it merges with the memory of my father, two massive figures, two imposing Ridgewell men, both broad-shouldered, both defined by their power. One is gone, silenced, reduced to a memory in a wooden box. The other remains, a fortress of silent, unyielding presence. That's when I understand. The silence in this church is not the silence of grief. It's the silence of a held breath. It's the quiet of a boardroom just before a hostile takeover is announced. No one here, least of all Marla with her chiming bracelets and her actress's smile, understands what is happening. They see an old man, broken by the loss of his only son, too stoic or too cold to show it. They see a grieving widow and a quiet daughter. They are wrong. They don't see the calculation. They don't recognize the calm of a general surveying a battlefield before the first shot is fired. This quiet is not an ending. It is a calibration. It is the necessary, terrifying silence before the start of a war. My grandfather's stillness isn't grief. It's strategy. A cold resolve settles over me, displacing the numbness. It's a different kind of cold. It's sharp, focused, and clean. Harlan Ridgewell will not cry. He will not weep for his son. He will not give Marla, or the board, or the assembled polite society of Grayford, the satisfaction of a single tear. He will stand like granite, and he will wait. And I, standing here with my hand on the cold wood, make a promise to the sassafras box and the stained glass saint. If he won't cry, I will. But not with tears. I will be the one to force this world, this company, this family, to hear the sob of the truth. I will make them listen. I will take this cold, calculated silence and I will turn it into a reckoning. The week after the funeral, the Grayford Gazette Society page ran the photo. There we were. The Ridgewell family, united in grief, captured in high resolution, somber perfection on the steps of St. Rook, Harlan, a granite statue of patriarchal strength, Marla, veiled and elegantly devastated, one hand clutching her black pearls, and me, Ava, the dutiful daughter, my face pale and composed. We looked like a promotional still for a prestige drama, or perhaps the cover of a charitable foundation's annual report. The caption spoke of legacy, strength, and continuity. It was a beautiful lie. Our family wasn't built on trust. It was built on bylaws, and the bylaws were cracking. My father, Robert Ridgewell, had been the CEO of Stonevale Holdings. He was the bridge between my grandfather's legendary, iron-fisted founding generation and the modern, data-driven world. My mother, his first wife, was a brief, gentle memory, a scent of freesia, and a collection of art history books, gone before I was 5. Then came Marla. She didn't just enter our lives. She executed a flawless merger. She was, at first, Robert's brilliant CFO, the velvet-wrapped steel of the financial world. She was ambitious, sharp, and wore her femininity like a weapon. She understood that in a world of gray-suited men, a flash of red lipstick and a perfectly timed, throaty laugh could be just as effective as a brutal Q3 projection. She married my father, and the merger was complete. The CFO and the CEO, a power couple that made the financial papers swoon. My childhood wasn't spent in parks. It was spent in the glass and steel ecosystem of the Stonevale Tower. I learned to be quiet in the back of boardrooms. My coloring books, eventually replaced by quarterly reports. I understood the beautiful, clean logic of a balance sheet. I learned to read pivot tables and logarithmic charts before I learned to drive a car. My father taught me the business not with affection, but with the same demanding precision he gave his top analysts. Look at the delta, Ava. The story is always in the delta, not the totals. Marla had a different philosophy. Her education was in social engineering. A smile is also a KPI. Ava, she'd tell me, her own smile fixed and bright, never quite reaching her eyes. It's a key performance indicator. It tells people you're in control, that you're approachable, that you're not a threat, until you need to be. Her lessons often came with a physical punctuation, a hand on my shoulder, clasping it just a fraction of a second too long, a pat on the back that landed with a sharp thwack between my shoulder blades, just hard enough to make me straighten my spine in surprise. It was a constant, low-level physical assertion of dominance, disguised as mentorship, as step-maternal affection. It was her way of saying, I can touch you, I am in charge here. But the real power, the gravitational center of our universe, was Harlan, my grandfather. He was a living legend in Grayford, a man who had built an empire from a single quarry. He was quiet, deep-voiced, and rarely spoke in meetings. He didn't need to. His power wasn't operational. It was fundamental. It resided in the dense, legally impenetrable document that governed the Harlan family trust. He held the majority voting shares. He was the fail-safe, the patriarch, the man who could end a CEO's career with a single, softly spoken no. He observed, he listened, and as I had just learned, he did not cry. Now, with my father gone, a new story was being whispered across the open-plan offices and in the hushed, carpeted executive wing. The period of respectful grief was ending, and the power vacuum was pulling everyone in. The rumors were consistent. Marla was making her move. She was leveraging the sympathy, the narrative of the brave widow stepping up to honor her husband's legacy. She was consolidating. She wanted full, unrestricted control of the cash flow, the liquid assets, the discretionary spending. She wanted the keys to the kingdom while the king was still cold. I wasn't in finance. I had deliberately carved out my own territory. I ran the product data analytics team on the 34th floor. My world was user funnels, engagement metrics, and predictive modeling. I didn't track dollars. I tracked human behavior, translated into data. I could tell you, with 95% certainty, what a user would click on next. And I knew Marla. I had been collecting data on her for a decade. It was my own private ritual, my emotional audit. It wasn't a diary, full of feelings. It was a log file, stored in a triple encrypted personal drive. Date, 04/17. Location, Q2. Strategy dinner. Action, M. Commented on my severe choice of dress. Interrupted my presentation on user acquisition to clarify a point with a non sequitur about Q1's EBITDA, effectively derailing my flow. Physical contact. 1 shoulder squeeze, duration 3 seconds. Pressure, high. Date, 08/22. Location, hallway. 47th floor. Action, M. Joked to a new VP that I inherited my job title. Laughed when I didn't. Stood in my path, forcing me to walk around her to get to the elevator. Bracelets, the heavy silver ones. Sound, loud. Date, 10/03. Location, family home, study. 2 weeks before Dad's heart attack. Action, M told Dad I was stressing him out by questioning the new consulting line item in the budget, called me adversarial and ungrateful. Dad told me to let the CFO handle the finances. I had spreadsheets of this, years of it, a pattern of microaggressions, dismissals, and quiet humiliations, all designed to paint me as the difficult, emotional daughter, the girl who didn't understand the real business. Now, I was turning that same analytical eye onto the company's books. I wasn't in finance, but I had high-level clearance. I could see the tributaries of the main river, and I could smell something wrong in the water. The data was off. There was a faint, discordant signal in the cash flow, a pattern that didn't match the company's stated operations. It was like a user behavior model that had a sudden, inexplicable deviation. It was the scent of anomaly. The lobby of Stonevale Holdings is a 3-story atrium of Italian marble and glass. On the far wall, carved into the stone in elegant, 6-foot-high letters, is our company motto, "Built on Trust." I stood there the Monday after the funeral, my heels clicking on the polished floor. The sound echoed in the vast, empty space. It was early, 6:03 a.m. The only other sound was the faint squeak of the night custodian's rubber-soled shoes, wiping away the tracks of the persistent rain from outside. He was wiping away the evidence of the storm, but the floor was still damp. I looked up at the motto, "Built on Trust." I thought of Marla's rehearsed smile, of my grandfather's dry eyes, of my father's signature on documents he likely hadn't read in months, of my own encrypted log file. The floor squeaked under my feet. The whole building, I thought, was squeaking with the sound of wet shoes and pretty, profitable lies. The cracks weren't just in the bylaws. They were in the foundation, and I was the only one with the data to prove it. It was Friday, 9:14 p.m. The 47th floor was silent. This was the executive wing, Marla's territory. My team was on 34 in the bullpen, the land of data and whiteboards. The 47th floor was a different world. It was a hushed cathedral of gray carpet, recessed lighting, and expensive, scentless air. The cleaning crews had already passed, leaving the faint, sterile tang of ammonia and the hum of the HVAC system as the only signs of life. I was here because Marla had summoned me. A curt, 8:00 p.m. calendar invite had appeared on my screen. Urgent, Q4 projections. It was a lie. We both knew my team's data wouldn't be ready for another 2 weeks. This was not a meeting. It was a confrontation she had scheduled. The Aurora boardroom was at the very end of the hall. It was Marla's showpiece, a monument to transparency built almost entirely of reinforced, triple-paned glass, jutting out from the building's corner. It was supposed to symbolize clear vision, a panoramic view of the empire. Tonight, it felt like an interrogation box. A display case suspended 47 stories above the wet, glittering streets of Grayford. The lights inside weren't the warm, soft whites of the main offices. They were harsh, cold, white LED strips, clinically bright, designed for high-definition video conferencing. They made the 30-foot polished black granite table look like a sacrificial altar. The heavy glass door hissed shut behind me. The click of the magnetic lock engaging was unnervingly loud in the profound quiet. Marla was waiting. She wasn't at the table. She stood by the far window, her back to me, a silhouette against the city lights. Her posture was rigid. "You've been busy, Ava," she said. Her voice was flat, echoing slightly off the glass. All the velvet was gone, leaving only the steel. "I run the analytics department," I replied. I kept my voice just as level, just as cold. I walked toward the table but didn't sit. "Busy is the job." "You know what I mean." She turned slowly. She was dressed for battle, a sharp, midnight blue pantsuit, her makeup immaculate, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe, glossy chignon. The heavy, polished metal bracelets were on her right wrist, a cluster of modern, brutalist silver. "Digging," she said, taking a step toward me. "Digging around in cost centers and vendor accounts that are none of your concern." "I follow the data," I said, my heart starting a low, heavy drumbeat. The data led me to some anomalies in third-party consulting fees, a pattern that didn't make sense. I was going to flag it for a formal internal audit. "No." She took another step. "You were going to bring it to Harlan. You were going to run to your grandfather with your pathetic little spreadsheets." I didn't answer. The silence confirmed it. "You think he'll listen to you?" She scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. "The quiet little data girl? The sentimental daughter?" She moved faster than I could have anticipated. 1 second she was by the table. The next, she was in my personal space. She shoved me. It wasn't a nudge. It was a full-bodied shove, her forearm connecting with my chest. My back slammed into the floor-to-ceiling glass wall. The impact knocked the air from my lungs in a sharp, painful woof. The entire glass panel vibrated against my shoulder blades. The sound a low thrum. The glass was cold. A shocking, deep cold that penetrated the fabric of my blouse. "Listen to me," she hissed, pressing forward, using her height and her heels to loom over me. She crowded me into the corner where the two glass walls met. I was boxed in, trapped. Her left hand shot out and gripped my right shoulder, hard. Her nails, perfectly manicured, filed to a slight, fashionable point, dug into the muscle, just above my collarbone. It wasn't a grab. It was an anchor. The pressure was intense, sharp, like a metal document clip biting into a thick stack of papers. "No one will ever believe you," she whispered. Her voice was a low, venomous thrum. The scent of her perfume washed over me. It was something expensive and cold, like crushed green leaves and ozone. It was a scent designed to announce her arrival. "You are just a girl, a sentimental child with the Ridgewell name. Your father is gone. Harlan is an old man, lost in his grief. I am Stonevale now." My eyes darted up, past her perfectly sculpted cheekbone, to the corner of the ceiling, the small, domed security camera. Its little red LED status light was dark. My mind was racing, but not with fear, with data. Camera status equals offline. Location equals isolated. 47th floor. Witness status equals null. Threat equals physical. I must have tensed, or my gaze must have given it away. I whispered it, the word dry and scratchy in my throat. "The camera?" Marla's smile was terrifying. It was a slow, triumphant peeling back of her lips, a baring of perfect white teeth. She laughed. It was not her throaty, boardroom laugh. It was a short, sharp, ugly sound, like ice cracking. "Oh, darling, you really are just a tech girl, aren't you?" She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a confidential murmur, as if sharing a corporate secret. "Financial experience teaches you the real lesson. Control the data stream before you need to, then you control the narrative." She gestured vaguely to the dark hallway outside the glass walls. "The cameras on 47 are down for unscheduled maintenance. The night guard's schedule has been adjusted. He's on his meal break, on the ground floor. The elevator bank is code-locked until 10 p.m. The door to this room is locked from the outside." She was right. The main glass door, though transparent, was sealed. The hallway beyond was a dark, empty canyon of polished marble and recessed lighting. We were 47 floors above the street, completely and utterly alone. My internal audit was complete. She was confirming every suspicion. "You will stop," she commanded, her voice hardening. Her grip on my shoulder tightened, her nails biting deeper. "You will delete your little project. You will go back to your desk on the 34th floor and you will analyze user click-through rates, and you will say nothing." I met her eyes, the cold resolve I'd felt at the funeral, the icy clarity, flooded back. It wasn't grief, it was steel. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the hum of the HVAC. It was the single word that lit the fuse. Her face twisted. The mask of the velvet-wrapped steel CFO didn't just crack, it vaporized. It was replaced by pure, undiluted rage. "You little bitch." She didn't slap me with her palm. That would have been too human, too emotional. She swung her right arm, not as a punch, but as a vicious backhand, a gesture of pure, contemptuous dismissal. She did it specifically so the heavy, polished metal bracelets on her wrist would lead the impact. I saw the flash of silver. I tried to turn my head, but I was pinned against the glass. I was too slow. The metal hit my face with a sickening, dry clack. It wasn't a fleshy sound. It was the sound of metal hitting bone. It struck me high on the left cheekbone. The sound was exactly, precisely, like a metal spoon striking the delicate rim of a crystal glass. Sharp, clear, and ringing. My vision in my left eye exploded in a burst of white static. Tears flooded it instantly. A a purely physiological response to the impact. My ear on that same side filled with a high-pitched electronic whine. The world tilted, the grid of city lights outside the window blurring into streaks. The pain was a bright, clean line. It cut through everything: the confusion, the grief of the past weeks, the sterile air of the room. It was a single, verifiable data point: assault equals true. Then came the smell. Underneath her cold, leafy perfume, I smelled something new, the sharp, unmistakable, metallic tang of my own blood, a small cut, right on the bone. She held me pinned to the glass for a second longer, her nails still digging into my shoulder. Her face contorted. She was breathing heavily. The civilized mask completely gone. She had made the single greatest miscalculation of her career. She thought this was a physical fight, a dominance game. She thought she was silencing a girl. But I wasn't a girl, I was a system, and she had just provided the key data point I was missing: confirmation. This wasn't the act of a CFO protecting her company. This was the act of a criminal, cornered and terrified. I didn't wipe the blood. I didn't cry out. The ringing in my ear began to subside, replaced by the heavy, steady thudding of my own heart. I just stared at her. I straightened my spine, pushing back against the glass, making myself taller, even as her hand held me. I spoke slowly. My voice didn't even shake. "You just controlled the wrong person." Marla's hand was still on my shoulder, her nails digging in, her bracelets cold against my skin, the echo of my own quiet defiance. "You just controlled the wrong person." Hung in the sterile, soundproofed air of the glass room. Her face, contorted with rage, was about to twist into a sneer, or perhaps another strike. Then, a sound. A sound that did not belong. A sound from the dark, empty hallway. Tap. Marla froze. Her head whipped toward the glass door. Tap. The sound was sharp, precise, splitting the silence. Wood on marble. It was slow, impossibly steady, a perfect, measured rhythm. Tap. A metronome, counting down. My grandfather, Harlan Ridgewell, appeared at the threshold. The heavy glass door, the one Marla had boasted was locked, hissed open on its pneumatic hinge, the sound of a vacuum seal breaking. He stood in the doorway, framed by the dark hall, his silhouette absolute. He was not out of breath. He was not angry. He was simply present. He stepped fully into the room, and the door hissed shut behind him. He tapped the walnut cane on the granite floor one more time. Marla's hand flew from my shoulder as if she'd been burned. She stumbled back a step, her composure shattering and reforming in a split second into a mask of shocked, indignant surprise. "Harlan!" Her voice was too high, too sharp. "What are you doing here? This is a private—" "I disagree," he said. His voice was soft, conversational. He lifted the cane slightly. It wasn't just a simple piece of walnut. The cap, which I had always assumed was polished silver or obsidian, was something else. As he turned it in his hand, a single, tiny point of light, no larger than a pinhead, glowed on its surface. A brilliant, cold, digital blue. Then I heard it. A faint, mechanical click. It was so quiet. I almost missed it. It was the sound of a high-quality recording device being stopped. It had been on this entire time. Marla didn't understand. She was still processing his presence. "You have no right," she began. "This is a secured floor. I was having a performance review with Ava." "Your performance," Harlan said, his voice still impossibly mild, "has been noted." And then, the world exploded. Not with a bang, but with a hiss of static. A faint, high-pitched feedback whine erupted, not from inside the room, but from outside, from the ceiling speakers in the hallway. There was a crackle, and then a voice, my voice, filled the 47th floor. It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was amplified, echoing off the marble and glass of the empty corridor, loud enough to be heard in the elevator bank. "The camera?" Marla's blood drained from her face. Her eyes, wide with a dawning, animal panic, flew from Harlan, to me, to the ceiling. Then came her own voice, booming, confident, and utterly damning. "Oh, darling, you really are just a tech girl, aren't you? Financial experience teaches you the real lesson. Control the data stream before you need to. Then, you control the narrative." "No," Marla whispered. She stared at the speaker grill outside the glass. The recording continued. Every hissed threat, every word of her plan. "The cameras on 47 are down. The night guard's schedule has been adjusted. The door to this room is locked from the outside." "Harlan, turn it off!" she shrieked, lunging not for him, but for the intercom panel on the wall. "It's the emergency broadcast system, Marla," Harlan said, his voice cutting through her amplified one. Tied into the PA, there was an 8:50 p.m. email memo. "Routine maintenance and testing. You must have missed it while you were preparing." The 21 Aqua, maintenance. It wasn't maintenance. It was a live feed. The recording reached its climax. The sound of her bracelets. The sharp, ugly clack of metal on bone. My own sharp intake of breath. Marla stared at Harlan, her chest heaving. You recorded me. That's illegal." "Is it?" Harlan mused, taking a step toward the center table. "My legal counsel seems to think that recording a conversation to document a credible threat of extortion and physical assault, in my own building, falls well within my rights as owner." He finally looked at her, his dry eyes holding hers. "I didn't cry at my son's funeral, Marla. I found it's a poor use of resources. I save my tears for justice." Marla's mind was racing, her CFO brain running scenarios, looking for an exit, a loophole. Her eyes darted around the room. The elevator, the fire escape, her phone. She sprinted from the room, past Harlan, into the empty hall. She slammed her hand on the elevator call button. The polished steel button remained dark. She hit it again, and again, nothing. "The elevators for this floor were placed on hold at 2110. Harlan's voice called out from the boardroom. He hadn't moved. She spun, running for the red exit sign at the end of the corridor. She hit the panic bar with her full body weight. The door didn't budge. It rattled in its frame, a solid, final thud. "That would be the drill component of the test," Harlan continued, his voice echoing in the hall. "A full security containment, activated by the Risk Compliance Office, my office. The magnetic bolts are engaged. No one comes in. No one leaves the floor, not even you." She was trapped, 47 floors up, in a hallway that was now her prison cell. Her eyes went wide. The smart building, the network. She fumbled in her pocket for her phone, her hands shaking. She raised it. Her face, illuminated by the screen, was a mask of pure terror. "No signal. The Wi-Fi. It's down." "Not down," I said. My voice was hoarse. I had walked to the doorway, standing beside my grandfather. "Just reprioritized." Marla looked at me, her gaze flickering to the bleeding, swelling mark on my cheek. "The building's wireless mesh network," I explained, the data girl finding her voice. "It's a separate system from the hard lines, but it, too, responds to an owner-level command. Your devices have just been deprovisioned." She was cut off. No cameras, no elevators, no phone, no escape. I turned and looked at my grandfather. I finally understood. The granite stillness, the dry eyes at the funeral. It wasn't shock. It wasn't denial. It was a plan. He had been silent because he was listening. He had been still because he was planning. He knew, or at least had a terrible suspicion, about the money. My digging, my little project, hadn't been a surprise to him. It was a catalyst. He knew I would find the truth, and he knew Marla's psychology better than she knew herself. He knew she wouldn't tolerate a threat. He knew she would move to silence me. He had used me as bait. A cold, brilliant, and utterly ruthless tactical move. He hadn't sent me to the 47th floor. He had simply allowed her to summon me, knowing he had the entire floor wired for sound. "And now, for the finances," Harlan said, breaking the terrible silence. He turned his head slightly, as if speaking to the empty air. "Jonas, you may proceed." He was speaking to the microphone in his cane. "Jonas Hale, my chief legal officer," he explained to Marla, who was leaning against the marble wall, all the fight gone out of her. "He's been waiting at the reception desk, the one with the secure hardline. For the last 30 minutes, he has been on a conference call with our partners at the bank." He took a step toward her. "Under the emergency provisions of the Harlan Family Trust, citing gross malfeasance and a clear and present danger to the company's assets, which you have just been kind enough to provide, I have activated my majority voting rights, as of 90 seconds ago. All discretionary funds, all signature authorities, and all access privileges tied to the office of the Chief Financial Officer have been indefinitely frozen." He let the words land. "Your corporate cards, Marla, they are now just pieces of plastic. The consulting accounts you've been draining are locked." A choked, strangled sob tore itself from Marla's throat. It was a raw, ugly sound. Harlan lifted his walnut cane. The blue light at the cap, which had dimmed, flashed once more, bright, sharp, and final. A third click? I knew that one, too. Backup complete. File saved and mirrored to legal hold server. The amplified, damning audio in the hallway cut off, plunging the 47th floor into an abrupt, heavy silence. The test was over. The trap was sprung. The data was secure. My grandfather finally turned his full attention to me. His granite-gray eyes moved from my face to the angry, purple-red welt on my cheekbone, where the blood was beginning to dry. His expression did not change. He did not frown. He did not grimace. But his hand, the one holding the walnut cane, tightened. His knuckles went white. He hadn't cried with tears, but he was crying, right now, with pure, controlled, tectonic rage. The sound of the PA system cutting off plunged the 47th floor into a vacuum of silence. It was heavier and more absolute than before. Marla, a few yards down the hall, was panting, her chest rising and falling. The only other sound was the faint, electronic hum of the building's brain, working against her. Harlan Ridgewell did not raise his voice. He simply spoke into the air, his thumb resting on the cap of his cane. "Jonas, confirm the hold." A beat of silence. Marla watched him, her eyes wide, still not comprehending the totality of her defeat. "Confirmation received," Harlan said, not to her, but to the room. He turned his gaze to Marla. "It's done. The CFO discretionary fund, the executive travel wallets, the contingency accounts, every internal spending vehicle you had sole signature authority over, they are frozen." This was the chess game. The audio recording was the check. This was the mate. "You can't," Marla whispered, shaking her head. "The bank, the protocols. It requires board approval." "It requires my approval," Harlan corrected, his voice flat. "The Harlan Family Trust is the primary stakeholder. The bank is our partner. When I declare a Code 9, a material threat to fiduciary integrity, they don't wait for a committee. They act. They just did. You have no more financial authority within Stonevale Holdings. You can't move a dollar." Rage and panic warred on Marla's face. She was a creature of action, of control. She spun away from him, her heels slipping slightly on the polished marble, and ran toward her corner office, the one with the private elevator and the secure terminal. She grabbed her keycard from her pocket and slammed it against the reader. The reader did not flash green. It beeped 3 times, a fast, descending, negative tone, and flashed a solid, mocking red. Denied. She tried again, red, again, red. "Your access credentials were revoked," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. I hadn't moved from the boardroom doorway. The throbbing in my cheek was a cold, steady drumbeat. "Concurrent with the financial hold. It's a standard security protocol." Marla's eyes were wild. My laptop, my tablet. If you attempt to log onto the network with any personal device, you will be met with a legal warning. I continued, the analyst in me calmly stating the facts. It's a digital evidence preservation order, filed by Jonas Hale 5 minutes ago. The moment your device authenticates, it will begin uploading a mirror of its contents to our legal servers. Anything you try to delete, well, we'll see that too. She looked cornered. She backed away from her locked office door and spotted the landline on her assistant's empty desk, a last resort, an outside line. She lunged for the receiver, yanking it to her ear. She jammed her finger on the 9 for an outside line. Nothing, no dial tone. She hit the speakerphone button. A shrill, fast, repeating beep, beep, beep filled the hallway. The sound of a system that is busy, or broken, or closed. The PBX, Harlan said, walking slowly toward her, his cane tapping with each step. The private branch exchange, it too, is in event mode. All external lines from this floor are routed to a recording buffer in the legal department. You can't call your lawyer. You can't call the press. You can't call anyone. She was an island, cut off from her money, her data, her access, and her communication. She was just a woman in an expensive suit, trapped in a glass box of her own making. This is just the temporary measure. Marla, Harlan said. He stopped a few feet from her. The anesthetic. The surgery comes tomorrow. Marla's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. What? I have instructed Jonas Hale to formally notify the board and all major shareholders. Under Article 7 of the Trust's Charter, the Crisis of Integrity Clause, I am using my majority voting power to bypass the standard 72-hour notice. He checked his watch. A simple, old-fashioned timepiece. An emergency shareholder session has been called for 9:00 a.m. tomorrow. 12 hours, I whispered. 12 hours, he confirmed. You can't, Marla shrieked, finding her voice. You're ruining the company, the stock. This will destroy us. You're destroying your son's legacy. No, Harlan said. You did that. I am cleaning the wound. They won't believe you, she spat, her confidence returning in a desperate flood. It's my word against hers. A hysterical, grieving daughter who always resented me. That recording? A violation. It will be thrown out. You have nothing. I felt a cold, sharp anger, not the hot, messy kind. It was the anger of a spreadsheet, of a number in the wrong column, of a data point that refused to reconcile. My pain was a data point. My anger was a calculation. I was not shaking. I was not hysterical. I was an auditor who had found the fraud. You're wrong, I said. I pulled my own phone from my pocket. My company issued high clearance device, which was working perfectly. I tapped the screen, bringing up the file I had sent to Jonas Hale at 9:05 p.m. You thought I was just looking. I was documenting. While you were planning your performance review, I was cross-referencing. I turned the screen so she could see it. It was a simple data map, a flowchart. These are the third-party consulting fees you told my father I was stressing him out over. They were all paid to one vendor, Horizon Avenue, LLC. Marla's face went white. The address on the incorporation documents was a mailbox rental store, but the IP address that accessed the payment portal from our system, the one that uploaded the invoices, it never changed. It was a fixed residential IP. I tapped the screen. A new page opened. It traces to a condo building on Dryden Key. Your assistant's condo, the one you co-signed the lease for 3 years ago. She's the sole officer of the shell company. I looked up from my phone. That data snapshot, Marla, is already in the board's inbox, attached to the emergency meeting invitation. That's not all, I said, my voice dropping. The Stonevale Charitable Endowment, my father's project, the children's wing at Grayford General. Marla actually recoiled, as if I had physically struck her. You've been bleeding it, every quarter, a management service fee, always for $49,000, just under the $50,000 threshold that would trigger an automatic board review. You've been siphoning it, using a charity as your private bypass. routing it to a fund you alone control. And that, Harlan said, is where the IT department comes in. While we've been speaking, our forensic team has been executing the preservation order. They are performing a full, bit-for-bit image of your server-side hard drive. Deleting the files won't help. Marla, the shadows are all there. The transfers, the ledgers, everything. She finally broke. The steel shattered. She slid down the marble wall, her legs giving out, and covered her face, a raw, choked sob. The first genuine sound I had heard from her all night echoed in the hall. It was the sound of a queen checkmated. Harlan Ridgewell stood over her, a granite monolith. He watched her for a long, cold moment. The silence was absolute, broken only by her weeping. He turned, very slowly, and looked at me. His eyes traveled from my face to the angry, swelling bruise on my cheekbone, where a tiny cut was still welling with blood. His expression remained hard, unreadable. He then looked back down at the collapsed figure on the floor. "You made a critical error in judgment, Marla," he said, his voice a quiet rumble. "A fundamental miscalculation of assets." He paused, and for the first time, I heard something beneath the cold calculation. I heard the grandfather. "You thought she was just my son's daughter, an emotional liability, a sentimental child to be managed." He tapped his cane on the marble, a single, final sound. "You were wrong. She is a Ridgewell. She is an asset, and she is the future of this company." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to an icy whisper that cut through her sobs. "You targeted the wrong one. Hitting my granddaughter," he said, "is a direct hit on my balance sheet, and I always protect my balance sheet." Marla's sobs were a wet, ugly sound in the marble and glass canyon of the 47th floor hallway. Harlan stood like a statue, his judgment delivered. My cheek was a firestorm of pain, a high-pitched throb that matched the ringing in my ear. But beneath the pain, there was a cold, clean satisfaction. She had called me a data girl as an insult. She had no idea how right she was. This wasn't a corporate takeover, it was a forensic audit, and I had been running it in the dark for weeks. It started not with money, but with time. I have admin-level access to Mirror, our in-house analytics and logging tool. It's my creation. It's designed to track user engagement patterns, to see how our clients interact with our data products. But it also logs internal access. It sees everything. Who accesses what file? From where? At what time? 3 weeks ago, I ran a query, not on clients, but on our own executive payroll files. I was looking for anomalies, and I found one, a series of access logs, all between 3:00 a.m. and 3:04 a.m., twice a month, always from a non-company, non-standard IP. Someone was checking the payroll batches before they were processed. This led me to the disbursements. Tucked away in the code, I found a set of special project allowances that didn't behave like normal compensation. They weren't tied to an employee ID. They were pushed, as lump sums, to a series of temporary single-use virtual credit cards. The legal entity receiving the payment changed every quarter. A classic shell game maneuver. It was clean, sophisticated, and, to a normal financial auditor, almost invisible. But I wasn't an auditor. I was a pattern tracker. The pattern was Marla. Once I had her sent, I followed it from the digital to the physical. I pulled her expense reports for the last 12 months. Most were noise, expensive dinners, first-class flights, but one stuck out, a $150,000 invoice for a Women in Leadership Executive Training seminar at a 5-star beach resort. The vendor was new. The attendee list was just CFO and guests. I ran a simple social media cross-reference. One of Marla's high society friends had posted a public Instagram story from that same resort, on that same weekend. The caption, "Happy 50th, Marla. What a party, Queen." The photo showed Marla, laughing, holding a champagne flute, surrounded by people who were definitely not Stonevale employees. She had expensed her own birthday party, a small, stupid, arrogant detail, a $150,000 small, expensive detail. But the real key came from her assistant, the one whose condo, I suspected, was tied to the shell company. I didn't have access to Marla's email. That would be a fireable offense. But her assistant? Her assistant was sloppy. She used the same password for her corporate account as she did for her personal cloud storage, a fact I found in a public data breach registry. I didn't break in. I just looked, and in her unsent drafts folder, I found the Rosetta Stone, a one-line email, saved but never sent, addressed to a private, corporate Gmail account. Subject, Q3 transfer. Body, Q3 complete. Move H's portion to escrow. Delete this. H? Who was H? It wasn't Harlan. It wasn't her assistant. This is where the 3:00 a.m. IP address came back into play, the one that was checking the payroll batches. I ran the IP against the public registrar. It wasn't a corporate address. It was a high-end residential IP, a luxury condominium building. Dryden K. I cross-referenced the building's resident list, publicly available property tax records, against my father's old digital calendars. And there it was, a name, a woman he had dated, briefly and intensely, years ago, before Marla, a woman he had, by all accounts, broken things off with badly, a woman who, I realized with a jolt of ice in my veins, had a serious, documented grievance against our family. H wasn't a person, it was a company. I looked up Horizon Avenue, LLC, a shell corporation, registered just 6 months after Marla married my father. The sole registered agent? The woman from Dryden Key, my father's ex-lover. Marla wasn't just stealing, she was laundering the money through an old, bitter enemy of the family. It was a perfect, mutually assured destruction pact. If the woman ever talked, she would implicate herself. And Marla had leverage over her, my father's secrets. This was the architecture of the crime. Now I just needed to prove Marla knew it. I needed to tie her, personally, to the fraudulent data. So I set a trap, a data bait trap. Yesterday morning, I sent a draft of a Q4 analytics report to Marla's entire executive team, including her and her assistant. I accidentally included a data table from the fraudulent consulting budget, but in my version, I had planted a single, tiny error. I had changed a 7 to an 8 in a 5-figure line item, a specific, meaningless, $10,000 mistake. Then, I waited. I didn't have to wait long. 14 minutes. That's how long it took for Marla's assistant to access my draft. 4 hours later, Marla presented her own financial forecast to the executive committee. I was in the back of the room, watching. When she got to the projections for third-party consulting, there it was, my mistake, my exact, specific, $10,000 error, copied, pasted, and presented as her own. She hadn't just looked at my report. She had stolen the data wholesale to build her own fraudulent presentation. It was what we call a data watermark, a digital die pack. She had stained her own hands. I packaged the log files from Mirror, the virtual card traces, the birthday invoice, the draft email, the IP trace to Dryden Key, and the time-stamped screenshots of the data watermark trap. I sent the encrypted bundle to Jonas Hale, my grandfather's lawyer. He met me in a coffee shop an hour later. His face grim. He'd reviewed the file. He looked up from his tablet, his lawyer's eyes cold and precise. "It's enough," he said. "It's more than enough. It's a conviction." He closed the tablet. "Stay away from her, Ava. This is a cornered animal. We go to Harlan in the morning." But I hadn't stayed away. Marla had summoned me. The cornered animal had struck. The memory of Jonas's warning evaporated, and I was back in the 47th floor hallway, the cold, sterile air, the sound of Marla's weeping. I turned from the scene and walked, my legs feeling strangely steady, into the executive washroom. The light snapped on, revealing a cavern of black marble and spotless chrome. I faced the mirror. The data girl stared back at me. My face was pale, my hair disheveled from the struggle, and on my left cheekbone, a magnificent, terrible bruise was blooming, a swirl of deep purple and angry red, with a small, crescent-shaped cut from her bracelet. It was ugly. It was real. Marla thought she had marked me, branded me as a victim. I leaned closer to the glass. My eyes were not a victim's eyes. They were not my father's sad eyes. They were my grandfather's eyes. They were cold, clear, and sharp. She hadn't given me a mark of shame. She had given me a receipt, proof of purchase, the final, physical data point that correlated all the digital ones. I gently touched the swelling. It hurt. Good. It was the pain of truth. "Okay," I whispered to the reflection. "Now for the meeting. 9 o'clock. Not a.m. 9 o'clock. In the corporate world, 9 o'clock a.m. is a suggestion. 9 o'clock is a summons." The Catalyst Hall was our largest presentation space, a multi-million-dollar theater of brushed steel, acoustic wood paneling, and seating for 200. It was designed for product launches and triumphant year-end reports. Today, it was a courtroom. The massive 8K LED wall at the front, usually displaying dynamic sales charts, was stark. It read, in severe white letters against a black background, "Special Session, Governance and Integrity." The room was full. The board members were in the front row, a jury of gray suits. Behind them sat the major stakeholders, the fund managers, the institutional investors. Their faces were tight, smelling of expensive coffee and nervous money. And, coincidentally, near the back entrance stood a small, contained group of reporters from the major financial journals. A leak about a major leadership review at Stonevale had apparently drawn their interest. Harlan's handiwork. He wasn't just cleaning house, he was fumigating it in public. I stood to the side of the stage, a laptop on a small podium. I hadn't hidden the bruise. It was impossible to hide. It was a spectacular, livid mark on my cheekbone, a galaxy of purple, blue, and black. I had applied no makeup to cover it. I wore it like an exhibit. At 09:01, the main doors opened. Marla swept in. She was flanked by a man I didn't recognize, but his suit screamed litigator. He was all polished aggression and carried a briefcase that looked like it could withstand a bomb. Marla looked flawless. Her makeup was a mask of professional composure. She was back to being the velvet-wrapped steel CFO, indignant and under siege. She saw the press, and a flicker of pure venom crossed her face before she replaced it with a look of weary, dignified resolve. She was already crafting her narrative. The grieving widow, attacked by a power-hungry family. She and her lawyer took their seats in the front row, pointedly separated from the board. The room fell silent. Harlan Ridgewell walked to the central podium. He did not look at Marla. He did not look at me. He looked at the stakeholders. He placed both hands on the podium. Then, he reached for his cane, which leaned beside it. He tapped the head of the cane, which was plugged into the podium's AV system, 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. "Begin," he said. The main house lights dimmed. The microphone system crackled to life. And then, audio. It was not a full recording. It was 12 seconds. 12 seconds of curated, high-fidelity sound, blasted through a concert-grade speaker system. First, Marla's voice, hissing and venomous. "You are just a girl, a sentimental child with the Ridgewell name. I am Stonevale now." A beat of silence. Then, my own voice, quiet, defiant. "No." Then, the climax. Marla's enraged snarl. "You little bitch." And finally, the sound, the sickening, sharp clack of metal on bone. It rang through the auditorium, a sound so clear and violent that several people in the front row physically flinched. The audio cut. The lights came back up, revealing a room of shocked, pale faces. Everyone was staring, first at Marla, then at me, standing by the stage, the physical proof of the audio stamped on my face. "This is an outrage." Marla's lawyer was on his feet, his voice booming. "This is a private conversation, illegally recorded. It's a violation of privacy, a violation of wiretapping laws. It is inadmissible, and it is a complete fabrication. Marla was white-knuckling the armrest, her mask of composure shattered. He's right. It's a lie. She attacked me. Jonas Hale, my grandfather's lawyer, stood up from his seat beside the board. He was calm. He held a single sheet of paper. Mr. Abram, he addressed Marla's lawyer, you'll find that Section 4 part of the Stonevale Holdings employee contract, which Ms. Ridgewell and your client both signed, states that all communication systems, meeting rooms, and office spaces are corporate property. The company explicitly reserves the right to monitor and record any and all activity in these zones for security, governance, and integrity purposes. He placed the paper on the table. As of last night, the 47th floor was an active internal investigation zone. The recording was perfectly legal. It is evidence. Abram looked like he'd swallowed a wasp. He sat down, slowly. Now, Harlan said, his voice unchanged. My granddaughter, the head of our product data analytics division, has a presentation. He nodded at me. I stepped up to my podium. My heart was a cold, steady engine. Good morning, I said. My voice was amplified, clear, and did not shake. My name is Ava Ridgewell. For the past 6 weeks, I have been conducting a deep-level audit of specific financial anomalies. What I found, I said, clicking the first slide, is not an error, it is an architecture. The 8K wall lit up behind me. 12 slides, no more. Slide 1, the loop. I showed them the flow chart, the special project allowances moving to temporary virtual cards, the quarterly change in shell entities. This is a classic money laundering technique, designed to bleed corporate funds into untraceable pockets. Slide 2, the birthday party, the invoice for the $150,000 Women in Leadership seminar, side by side with the Instagram post. This is not an anomaly. This is arrogance. This is a pattern of converting corporate assets to personal luxury. I moved faster. The pace of the room was picking up. Slide 3, the shell. I showed them the incorporation documents for Horizon Avenue LLC, registered to a mailbox store. Slide 4, the IP address. I showed them the log from Mirror, the 3:00 a.m. access times, the unmasked IP. This is the residential IP that uploaded every single fraudulent invoice from Horizon Avenue. It traces to one building, Dryden Key. Marla was whispering furiously to her lawyer. He was shaking his head, his face grim. Slides 5 through 8, the data watermark. I explained the trap, the dummy report, the planted, specific $10,000 error. And here, slide 9, is the CFO's forecast. Presented to the executive committee yesterday, as you can see, our planted error is present. This is a digital fingerprint, proving, irrefutably, that the CFO's official projections were built using stolen, fraudulent data. A low, angry murmur started to build in the room. A hand went up. It was Marcus Thorne, from the Ashmere Fund. He was a major stakeholder, known for his ruthless focus on the bottom line. Ms. Ridgewell, he boomed. This is alarming. But what does it mean? Has the Q3 balance sheet, the one we all just based our forward guidance on, been materially distorted? This was the moment. I looked at him. The numbers presented to you were not a balance sheet. They were a narrative. The consulting fees were just the start. The real damage was in the charitable endowment. I hit the clicker, slide 10, a line graph, simple and devastating. It showed the endowment's principal over the last 3 years. This is the endowment's projected growth, I said, a green line moving steadily up. And this, I clicked again, a red line appeared. It started high, then plummeted, quarter after quarter, in sharp, $49,000 drops. It looked like a staircase going to hell. This is the reality. This is what Ms. Marla Ridgewell has been doing to my father's legacy. The balance sheet wasn't just distorted, it was a work of fiction. The graph collapsed. The sound in the room was a sharp, collective intake of breath. "She is lying!" Marla was on her feet, pointing at me, her face a mask of purple rage. "It's a fabrication. She has no proof. She's a bitter, hysterical girl trying to steal her father's company." "Proof," I said calmly. "You're right. We need proof." I clicked to slide 11. It was a screenshot. The draft email from her assistant's computer. Subject: Q3 transfer. Body: Q3 complete. Move H's portion to escrow. Delete this. Marla's lawyer, Abram, saw it. He put his head in his hands. "She's lying!" Marla shrieked again, desperation making her voice thin. H, see? It's Harlan. She's trying to frame him." The room went silent. This was the precipice, the moment of the turn. I met Marla's gaze across the room. I was no longer the girl in the glass box. I was the one holding the hammer. "No, Marla," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "H is not Harlan. I, too, wondered." I clicked to the final slide. Slide 12. The incorporation documents for Horizon Avenue LLC, side by side with the property tax records for the Dryden Key condo. The owner's name was highlighted in yellow on both. "H," I announced to the room, "stands for Horizon Avenue LLC, the shell company registered to this woman, a woman my father was involved with and broke with years before he met you, the woman whose name is on the lease at Dryden Key." The room erupted, not in shouts, but in a low, shocked, hissing sound. The press at the back were scribbling furiously. "You weren't just stealing," I said, speaking directly to Marla. "You were using my father's past as a weapon. You were laundering the money through an embittered ex-lover, creating a perfect circle of blackmail and silence." Harlan Ridgewell, who had been silent this entire time, turned his body. He did not look at the board, or the press, or me. He looked directly at Marla. His face was granite. His voice, when it came, was not a shout. It was a cold, quiet, terrible question that filled the entire hall. "You used my son's death," he asked, "to cover your theft? You stood at his funeral, with me, while you were hiding the money?" Marla stared at him. The room vanished. The lawyers, the press, the stakeholders, they were all gone. It was just her and the patriarch. She tried to speak. No sound came out. She took a step back, as if pushed by the physical force of his words. Her heel, the sharp, 4-inch stiletto of her power, caught on the edge of the plush carpet. She stumbled. She didn't fall. She just faltered. A single, uncontrolled wobble, the sound of her G-force, her perfect, controlled world, finally, irrevocably, tilting off its axis. In the dead, absolute silence of the Catalyst Hall, you could have heard a tear hit the floor. Financial press, who were now in a full-blown feeding frenzy. The glass doors of the Catalyst Hall hissed shut behind her. Through the glass, we could see her in the atrium. She made it to the main turnstile bank, the barrier between the public lobby and the secure elevators. She pulled her access card, the black CFO card, and swiped it. The reader beeped, a fast, angry, triple tone. It flashed a solid, bright red. Denied. We saw her swipe it again, red, again, red. She lost it. She hammered her fist on the stainless steel barrier, a single, violent, and utterly futile bang. The guards took her elbows, firmly this time, and steered her away from the elevators, toward the service exit. The first domino had fallen. Inside the hall, the collapse was accelerating. Jonas Hale's phone, sitting on the podium, vibrated. He glanced at it, then looked up, a thin, cold smile on his lips. "An update from our IT director," he announced to the stunned room. At 09:12 a.m., approximately 3 minutes ago, Marla's executive assistant, who is currently on the 47th floor, initiated a Level 7 data wipe command on her own email server. A new wave of gasps. This was active, conscious destruction of evidence. She was, of course, Unsuccessful, Jonas continued, as if discussing the weather. As per the legal hold I filed last night, her terminal has been in a sandboxed mirror mode for 12 hours. Her attempt to delete the draft email has simply been logged, time-stamped, and appended to the evidence file as proof of obstructive intent. Harlan nodded. The primary forensic image of that server was completed at 03:14 a.m. this morning. There was nothing left to delete. Another phone buzzed. This one belonged to Chairman Jacoby. He fumbled for it, held it to his ear, and his face, already pale, turned the color of ash. He hung up, his hand shaking. That was Michael from the bank, our primary partner. He looked at Harlan, his eyes wide with a new terror. They've been monitoring the endowment account since you activated the Code 9 last night. They are reporting, they are reporting 3 separate, unauthorized international wire transfer attempts, all made from the endowment fund, all initiated this morning, between 8:30 a.m. and 9:00 a.m. A cold sickness washed through me. She wasn't just planning an escape. She was trying to empty the accounts before the meeting. The bank's automated fraud system, Jacoby continued, reading from his notes, has blocked the transfers. The accounts are now on a full administrative hard lock, and the bank is formally offering their full and immediate cooperation with any regulatory or federal investigation. The word federal landed like a body blow. This was no longer just a corporate firing. This was prison time. In the back, the PR director, a woman named Harris, bolted. She slipped out the side door, her face a mask of panic, undoubtedly heading to the press, who were still clustered at the main entrance. Harlan saw her go. He spoke, his voice carrying over the new wave of panicked murmurs. Jonas, inform Ms. Harris that the official and only statement is no comment. Move the press to the 18th floor conference room. Inform them we will have a statement at noon. Lock it down. No one in or out. Jonas was already on his phone, texting. The information was being strangled, contained. The arteries were being clamped. Then my own phone vibrated. I looked down, a number I didn't recognize. The prefix was for the Dryden Key Exchange. My blood went cold. I looked at Harlan. He saw the change in my expression and nodded. I answered. My voice was a croak. Ava Ridgewell. Oh God, thank God. The voice on the other end was a man's, thin, reedy, and vibrating with pure animal terror. Is this Ms. Ridgewell? Ava? I saw the news alert, the emergency meeting. Who is this? I said. My name is Arthur Sims. I live at Dryden Key. I'm the one. She said it was just for tax purposes. She said it was just holding. He was rambling, hysterical, the sound of a small man caught in a very large machine. She paid me $5,000 a month just to sign the papers. I'm just the agent. I just held the mail. Don't let them take me. I didn't know. Jonas was at my side in an instant. He had seen my face. He held out his own phone, which was already on a new record screen, and gestured for me to put my call on speaker. I tapped the button. The man's terrified. Reedy voice filled the small space around the podium. I swear to God, I didn't know what Horizon Avenue was. I just signed where she told me to. The woman, the one who paid me. Jonas leaned in, his voice calm, projecting, and utterly lethal. Mr. Sims, this is Jonas Hale, Chief Legal Counsel for Stonevale Holdings. You are speaking on a recorded line, and you are being witnessed by the Board of Directors. To whom, exactly, are you referring? Who paid you? Mr. Sims? There was a wet, choking sob on the other end. The woman, the one who knew Mr. Ridgewell, the one who lives in the penthouse, the one who brought Marla here. He choked it out. He gave them the name of my father's ex-lover. Jonas hit stop on his recording. He looked at me, then at Harlan. Checkmate. A live, terrified witness, caught in the dragnet, who had just confirmed the entire conspiracy, on tape, in front of the board. The dominoes had all fallen. The side door to the hall burst open. It was Marla. She was alone this time, having shoved past her lawyer. Her hair was coming undone. Her face, which had been pale, was now a deep, blotchy red. She was a hurricane. The security guards were right behind her, but she was fast. She marched down the aisle, right to the foot of the stage, and stood there, staring up at Harlan. She was trembling. "You," she hissed. Her voice was a raw scrape, stripped of all its velvet. "You did this. You cold, bitter, old man. You would burn your son's company to the ground, just to spite me." The room was dead silent. The press, who had been ushered back in, were filming the whole thing. "You will regret this," she whispered, her voice shaking with a terrifying, absolute hatred. "I will spend the rest of my life. I will take everything from you. I will make you regret this." Harlan Ridgewell looked down at her. His granite face, for the first time, seemed to soften, not with pity, with a profound, ancient sadness. He shook his head, very slowly. "No, Marla, you are wrong." His voice was quiet, but the microphone picked it up, amplifying it, a final, terrible judgment. "My regret, my only regret, is that I didn't do this sooner. My regret is that I stood at my son's funeral, dry-eyed, like a stone. I failed him. I failed to see what you were. I failed to protect him." He looked at me, at the livid bruise on my face, a mark that seemed to glow under the lights. "I regret not crying," he said, his voice thick. "I should have been crying for years." He turned back to Marla. The granite was back, harder than ever. "So, no, I will not regret this. This is me finally making it right. This is my penance." He pointed to me, then to the board. "This is me, finally, crying." The guards took her arms. She didn't fight. She just stared at him, her eyes hollow, as they pulled her from the room. The door shut. Chairman Jacoby stood, his hands shaking so badly he could barely read his notes. We must formalize the minutes." Jonas Hale stepped up. He read from his own notepad, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. A brutal obituary for a career. "Let the minutes reflect. At 09:17 a.m., by unanimous vote, Marla Ridgewell was terminated, for cause. Let the minutes also reflect that this board, having reviewed the preliminary evidence of criminal fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy, will be turning the complete, unredacted file, including all recordings, digital logs, and the sworn testimony from Mr. Sims, over to the District Attorney's Office and the Securities and Exchange Commission, effective immediately." He closed his notepad. "This meeting is adjourned." The Catalyst Hall was a suspended moment. The air was thin, electric. Marla was gone, a ghost of rage and perfume, dragged from the room. The press was a stunned, silent mass. The stakeholders were staring, as if they had just survived a plane crash. Chairman Jacoby, still ashen, fumbled with his papers. The meeting is... We must." "We are not finished." Harlan's voice cut through the chaos. He was still at the podium, a pillar of absolute control. He turned from the board and looked at the remaining executives. "The office of the Chief Financial Officer is, by our charter, a fail-safe position. It cannot remain vacant. Furthermore, the office of the Chief Executive Officer," he paused, letting the words land, "has been functionally vacant for months, and tragically, is now permanently so. The company is adrift. It requires a head, not in a week, not tomorrow, now." He turned back to the stunned board. "Under the same Crisis of Integrity Clause, Article 7, the Harlan Family Trust holds the right to appoint an interim chief executive officer, effective immediately, for a period not to exceed 90 days, to stabilize the company and oversee the federal investigation." A new frantic silence fell. This wasn't just a removal. This was a coup. "The trust has a nomination," Harlan said. I was packing my laptop. My job was done. I just wanted to go home, to put ice on my face, to sleep for a week. The trust nominates Ava Ridgewell. My hand froze on my laptop. I looked up. The entire room. The board. The investors. The press. Swiveled their heads to look at me. At the girl with the bruised face and the data slides. I felt a wave of nausea. "No," I said. It was instinctive. A reflex. "Grandfather, no, I'm not. I can't. I'm an analyst." Harlan turned his head and looked at me. His eyes were not kind. They were not proud. They were pragmatic. They were the eyes of a general who needed a lieutenant to take the hill. "Save the company first. Ava," he said, his voice low, but it carried in the silent room. "We can grieve later. The company is bleeding. You are the only one here who knows where all the arteries are. You are the only one who has the truth." I don't have the experience," I whispered, a desperate, pointless protest. "You have this," he said, tapping the podium. "You have the facts. You have the name. You have their respect." He gestured to the board. "The rest is just management." "Chairman Jacoby," Harlan said, turning away from me. The decision made. "Call the vote." Jacoby, his face slack, looked at the board. A motion is on the floor. The appointment of Ava Ridgewell as interim chief executive officer. All in favor?" Marcus Thorne's hand shot up first. "Aye, she has my proxy. She has the truth." Another hand, another. "Aye, aye, aye." It was a supermajority. It was absolute. It was done in 10 seconds. "The motion carries," Jacoby breathed, looking at me with a mixture of terror and awe. "Ms. Ridgewell is the interim CEO of Stonevale Holdings." Jonas Hale was already at my side. He wasn't smiling. He was all business. He placed a single, heavy vellum document on my podium and uncapped a thick, black fountain pen. The pen looked old, heavy, and expensive. "This is the formal acceptance," he said. "It acknowledges your fiduciary duty and activates your executive authority, including all signature powers formerly held by the CFO. It's effective. Now." I looked at the signature line. Ava Ridgewell, Interim Chief Executive Officer. The title looked alien, impossible. I looked at my grandfather. He simply nodded. Once, "Take the hill." I took the pen. The metal was cold. I signed my name. The nib scratched against the thick paper. A sound like a key turning in a heavy, old lock. The ink, a deep, dark blue, spread into the fibers, a permanent, binding mark. My heartbeat, which had been a frantic drum, suddenly slowed, matching the steady, even flow of the ink. "She has no experience." The voice was a shriek. It came from the main doorway. Marla. She had fought her way back, one arm free from the guard's grip, her face a mask of unbelievable hatred. Her lawyer, Abram, was just behind her, trying to pull her back, his face crimson with humiliation. "You can't do this. She's a child. She's a data geek. She has no executive leadership experience. She will run this company into the ground." She was screaming at the board, at the stakeholders, her last, desperate appeal. I stood up, fully. I was no longer the girl at the side podium. I was the one at the center. I turned, so she could see my face, my bruise, my signature on the paper. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The microphone was mine. "You're right, Marla," I said. My voice echoed, filling the hall, cold and clear. "I don't have your experience. I have the truth, and I have a clean balance sheet. It seems that's what the board prefers." Abram finally got his hand on her arm and yanked her, bodily, from the doorway. "You'll all be hearing from me," she screamed, her voice muffled as the heavy doors slammed shut, the sound a final, dull thud. Silence. I turned back to the room. I felt 1,000 eyes on me. I saw fear, calculation, and a new, dawning respect. I leaned into the microphone. I wasn't speaking to the board anymore. I was speaking to the press, to the building, To the 10,000 employees of Stonevale Holdings. My name is Ava Ridgewell, I said. This meeting is over, but our work is just beginning. I have only one statement for all employees. I paused, letting the words gather weight. From this moment on, at this company, the numbers will mean what they say. I stepped back. Jonas Hale was already handing a press release to the PR team. In the atrium, visible through the glass walls, the massive LED screens that lined the escalators flickered. The old slogan, "Built on Trust," vanished. It was replaced, in the same severe white font from the meeting, with 3 new words: "Built on Truth." The press swarmed, shouting questions, their cameras flashing, but the security detail had formed a wall. Harlan Ridgewell walked slowly from the main podium and joined me. He looked smaller. The granite seemed to have softened. The iron in his spine had been transferred to me, through the ink of that pen. He looked at the new slogan on the wall. He looked at me. He reached over and placed his walnut cane, his symbol of power, his weapon, his recording device, flat on the table in front of me. The clack of the wood on the granite was quiet, but final. "Now," he whispered, his voice thick, and for the first time, I saw the shimmer of water in his dry, ancient eyes. "Now we can cry." I didn't stay in the Catalyst Hall. The moment Jonas Hale took the podium, I turned, the questions from the press, the shocked whispers of the board, the frantic energy of the PR team. It was just noise. I walked away from the stage, my heels clicking on the wood, and pushed open the heavy glass door that led not to the atrium, but to the 47th floor terrace. It was the glass box where Marla had cornered me, but the outside version. The wind hit me like a physical thing, a cold, wet slap of reality. It was a true Greyford wind, sharp and smelling of the river, of distant rain, and the unmistakable, cold, metallic tang of the building's steel skeleton. It tore the controlled, sterile air of the boardroom from my lungs. The city sprawled below, a silent, glittering grid of data points. My cheekbone, which had been a dull, hot throb, flared with a sharp, clean pain in the cold. I welcomed it. It was real. The glass door hissed open behind me. It was Harlan. He walked out, not with the force of the patriarch who had just dismantled an empire, but with the slow, measured steps of an old man. He stood beside me, not looking at the billion-dollar view, but at me. His eyes, as they had been at the funeral, were dry, but the granite was gone. They were just his eyes, old, blue, and tired. He raised his right hand, the hand that had gripped the cane, the hand that held the voting shares of the trust. It wasn't steady. A fine, persistent tremor shook his fingers. He didn't cup my face or offer a clumsy embrace. He simply reached out and let his fingertips, dry and papery, hover just over the livid, purple-black bruise on my cheek. He didn't touch the skin. He just felt the damage he had allowed. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I just held his gaze. He let his hand drop, gripping the cold steel railing instead. His knuckles went white. "Forgiveness," he said, his voice quiet, almost stolen by the wind. "It is a luxury, something for people who haven't had to count the cost." He looked out at the skyline. "The press will want a story of redemption. The board will want a return to normalcy, but we can't. Not yet." He turned his gaze back to me, his eyes sharp again. "Today, we chose justice. It is colder than forgiveness. It is harder, but it is clean. It is the only thing that balances the ledger." As if the building itself was listening, a sound floated up from the atrium far below. It was faint, but unmistakable. Click, clack, click. A pause. Then a high-pitched, electronic, 3-note error tone. Beep, beep, beep. We both heard it, the sound of Marla's card, her black, all-access CFO card, being swiped at the main turnstile, and being rejected, a final, permanent denial. The system, the building she had tried to possess, had officially, irrevocably, locked her out. My pocket vibrated. It was a furious, insistent buzzing against my hip. I pulled out my phone. The screen was a blinding white waterfall of notifications. Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Bloomberg, half a dozen unknown numbers, the press, the world, calling, demanding the narrative, the quotes, the story behind the blood and the money. I looked at the screaming, vibrating screen. Then I looked at the cold, quiet skyline. I pressed the power button on the side of the phone. The screen went black. The buzzing stopped. Silence. I turned and walked back inside, leaving my grandfather on the terrace. The Catalyst Hall was almost empty. The stakeholders and press were gone, herded out by Jonas and security. Only the boardroom table remained, littered with empty water glasses and discarded papers. I walked to the main podium. It was my podium now. I pressed the button for the building-wide PA system. A soft chime echoed through the empty hall. I leaned in, my voice, steady and calm, broadcast into every office, every elevator, every hallway. This is Ava Ridgewell. The special session is concluded. The meeting is over. I took my hand off the button. Harlan had followed me in. He stood in the shadows as Jonas, from the back of the room, hit the master control panel for the lights. The bright, harsh, clinical lights of the stage didn't just snap off. They began a slow, theatrical fade, dimming over 5 long seconds as the room sank into darkness. The great glass wall overlooking the atrium, the one that had been a window, transformed into a massive, dark mirror. My reflection stared back at me. I saw the suit. I saw the dark, ugly, magnificent bruise on my cheek. And I saw my eyes. They were not the eyes of the girl pinned in the corner last night. They were not my father's eyes, full of doubt. They were not angry. They were not afraid. They were just quiet, calm, the eyes of the woman who was now in charge. Harlan walked up beside me, his own reflection emerging in the glass. He looked at his cane, lying on the podium where he had left it, his weapon and his scepter. He picked it up, his grip firm again. He ran his thumb over the polished cap. The tiny blue light was dark. It was off. Its job was done. Everything that needed to be heard had been heard. He leaned on it, the weight of the day, the year, the decade, seeming to settle on him. I should have wept at his funeral, he whispered to the glass. I stood there like a stone. I failed him. I looked at his reflection, this old, powerful man, suddenly looking frail. I shook my head, my reflection moving with his. No, I said, my voice soft in the dark, empty room. You didn't. He turned, his reflection's eyes meeting mine. I nodded toward the cane in his hand, the plan, the audio, the trap. You already cried, I said. You just did it in your own way. He looked at me. He understood. He gave a single, slow, infinitesimal nod. The last of the ambient lights faded. The screen went black. Cut. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share your thoughts and comments below so we can connect. And if you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to the channel, liking this video, and support us further by hitting that hype button to help this story be heard by even more people.